At the center of the universe, at the border between the light and the dark, stands Castle Grayskull. For countless ages, the heroes of Grayskull have defended the universe against the forces of evil. Walk through the Hall of Living Pictures and learn the history and mystery of the masters of the universe. Dive deep into the mythology of Eternia, Etheria, and more. For those who know the stories of Grayskull will come the power. The power to be supreme. The power to be all-knowing. The power to be Legends of Grayskull.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 12 of Legends of Grayskull, the fan podcast where we discuss the history, the mystery, the magic, and mythology of He-Man, She-Ra, Eternia, Etheria, Primus, Nordor, Golden Books, Ladybird Books, UK Annuals, comics, mini-comics, magazines, old adventures, new adventures, the power of the good, and the way of the magic, and everything else. I'm Matthew Dooch. I'm here with Shawn Scavarna. Shawn, how are we doing tonight?
I gotta give you props, because right before we started recording, I go, you gotta work that last bit in there, and man, did he do it. Man, did you do it, Matt. I'll tell you, props, especially this hour of the night, man. That was very, very deft. Very deft. Very well done.
It's going to be coming up a lot here tonight because we've got some new adventures to talk about tonight.
Yeah, so how am I doing? I am both amazed and confused is what I am, because this week, we choose the stuff that we're going to cover usually Monday or Tuesday at the latest, record on Wednesday, and Matthew and I were talking, and he goes, I think it's time for new adventures. I'm like, what are you dragging me into?
Yes.
and
I threw him a curveball this week. So.
It is truly new adventures for me, because I never touched the stuff, ever. And there's that element of it's partially the fan reaction. Once you get into these groups, there is that, stay away from that stuff, it's not good. And partially it's, I didn't grow up with it, so there's no nostalgia to it. So there's an element of, like, it just completely ended in that nice little, I started with the mini comics and Filmation, went back to it in 2000X, and that big canyon of time between the two, it just fell right in there. And I just never went back to it, so.
Yeah, for me, it's I had a little bit more. I had one of the He-Man variants, not the first figure. I meant to look it up because I always get his name wrong. But the one with the swivel cut in his chest, so he did the big punch. But that was the only New Adventures figure I had. I know I saw a couple episodes here and there growing up, but yeah, I didn't really follow it too much. I had the shuttle pod vehicle, which we'll see in this episode, so there was a little bit of it for me, but not to the depths of actually seeing like a ton of it or it leaving a big impression on me. And this actual episode I didn't see until well into my teens, so and so for tonight we decided that we were just going to start from the beginning, a new beginning, if you will, because that is the name of the episode. It was the first episode of the New Adventures of He-Man series, and yeah, so like Shawn said, he had never seen it or doesn't remember seeing it if he did. When I first started getting into the fan community, it was the same thing. It especially back then, it was very much shunned. People said don't even bother, it's worthless, And so I never checked it out for the longest time. I just felt that the designs were too far from what I knew, and honestly, I never even tried giving it a chance. And then I did happen across one time during high school at like a used bookstore. They had the promo VHS for New Adventures. I don't know if you ever remember seeing that.
I honestly no, but who knows? I might have, and I just didn't even realize it back in those days.
Yeah, well, it's got the, if you've seen the commercials for the toy line, it had those like live action actors, you know. And if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
the VHS actually had like the live action actors like on the cover, but the episode itself was the actual cartoon, the New Adventures cartoon. And I think it was either attached to the figures or it was a mail away, something like that, you know. And I picked it up just because it's like, well, it's something He-Man, and it was probably only like a couple bucks or something. And I remember watching that, and I'm like, this is terrible. Like, it was the whole tape was like a half hour, maybe a little longer, and like the episodes that were the episode that was on it just wasn't good. Like, it didn't make sense, and I'm just like, well, I guess it's true. You know, this is just a bad series. You know. But what it turned out is for that particular tape, what they did is it was like parts of 3 different episodes chopped into one episode together. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Because they're really trying to help the series by doing this. Apparently,
it was part of this A New Beginning. It was like 10 minutes of this. It was like the part with them on Eternia and them being taken to the future, and then it jumped to another episode and had like 10 minutes of that, and then it jumped to another episode and had 10 minutes of that. So it was really like, once I finally sat down years after that and actually watched the whole series, I'm like, okay, well, this is better than that tape. But if they were putting this tape out to promote the series, it's like, well, that didn't do it any favors because it was very odd. So, but yeah, beyond that, I think I did. It was probably actually after 2000. Oh, I know it was after the Mike Young production series wrapped. Is when I finally sat down and really gave New Adventures a chance. Just because I was so bored and just needing something new, you know.
You needed to fill the void.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks to the bootlegs, I'd already seen all the Filmation. I'd seen all the MYP, obviously. I'd seen all the She-Ra. So it's like, okay, I need something here. So in my local comic shop had the bootleg complete New Adventures. So I'm like, okay. And so I did it. I sat down and I watched it all the way through, and you know, there's some good stuff in there. There's some bad stuff. But overall, I gained an appreciation for it after all these years. Between this and the classics, you know, really making these guys feel like a part of the line this time around. Which I know even with the original toys, they were trying to get there. Because if you noticed, after that first wave, they started like bulking them up and giving them more, you know, accessories and trying to make them a little more Masters-esque, you know.
Yeah, I've seen I have seen the original first edition of the New Adventures He-Man. And then, what is it? Is it Battle Punch or something they call him? Or was it Thunder Punch? Like, legit Thunder Punch?
Yeah, I think there was
or something.
Thunder Punch and a Battle Punch, and that's why I can never remember which one that I actually had.
But I do remember, like, even the face was looking a lot more like the traditional old-school He-Man face and all that in the toy line. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is just one of those things where it feels like, I don't know. It never drew me in any way, shape, or form to give it a shot, and it's not even. I don't want to say that I never wanted to. It was more of a. The feel of it was so unlike what I want that I just never even thought to do it. You know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I get it, but luckily I dragged you kicking and screaming here. So yeah, but the funny thing is that you actually have some new adventures in your collection, don't you?
I do. Let me see which ones there were again. I know Optic's in there. I really loved him from classics, and I know Tuscador's in here because when I saw him, I was like, "Oh yeah, like that works." And he was the first of the Ram Man bucks that I got when I first got into classics, and yeah, he's one that I have no knowledge of him to the extent of other characters in the original line, but
Right.
he looks so cool, I'll never give that one up. It's just that simple. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I have in here. I thought there was one
Well, you
other.
have Optic, right?
Well, yeah, I said
Okay,
Optic,
Optic,
but
Tuscador.
I did have a new adventure Skeletor for a while, but I ended up trading him. But I actually love that Skeletor.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's one that it's like he's not too expensive that I can't get him back eventually.
Right.
So that's kind of why I was okay with trading him. But I did have him, and you know and that's here's the thing. I mean, not to get into the episode too deep or whatever, but when you see what the Horsemen did with that character,
Yes.
and when you watch this episode,
Yes.
there is this element of really animation, really Jetlag. This is what you're pulling on us. And I'm not going to be the guy to start slamming it for he's got eyeballs or this and that. But there's this. It's just like there's this character within a character in the way that the Horseman did that.
Right.
All of the details, him looking broken but still ready to fight and all that kind of stuff. And I love that about the figure.
Right.
But I've seen like screen caps along the way, knowing this is what I'm about to get into with the Skeletor in this, and it's like I've told you, and I'll tell the listeners and the viewers.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the first time I watched this episode. I looked at it in almost 3 different perspectives. It's the very first time I've ever done that with anything. The first perspective was just me getting into this and figuring out what's going on. The second version was me looking at it and thinking to myself, I see what they were attempting to do, but I think they could have done it differently and better if they would have just tried a little something different maybe. And the third version was, okay, me at 8 or 9 years old seeing this on TV, what would I have done? And that version was the hardest for me to get behind because I'm so far removed from that age that now I can't. It's I said it to you privately. It's the Goonies to me. I never saw the Goonies when I was a kid. I never watched it. It was one of those movies that fell through the cracks for me. I got to watch like Temple of Doom and all these other movies like that, Monster Squad and all this stuff. Goonies just never was one that I went to. It was never one I had to see. And then it was when I was in my 20s, somebody was trying to get me to watch it. And every time I hung out with them, they'd try to get me to watch it, and I could never get through the entire movie. And then I finally watched it only like a couple years ago, and I just went, I don't get what the deal is with this. Like, I don't get the appeal because I'm not 7 watching this movie about kids on an adventure anymore. I'm in my 30s and 40s trying to watch this, and it's like, well, E.T. already filled that gap for me, or, you know, all these other movies when I was a kid were those movies, and Goonies just was it was left out in the dust, you know, just like this, you know, it's like that for me, I couldn't think of it, but yeah, I could see what the fan problems were in this episode, watching it and going like, yeah, anybody that loved Filmation, I would see this as a slap in the face in that way. I could... Yeah. I'm picking up what you're putting down, fans. Let me put it that way before we get too hot and heavy into this.
Especially if you don't see this first episode when, you know... Because I think this first episode did at least try to bridge. But, once again here, though, this was first-run syndication. I mean, 65 episodes in one season. It was following the same model that Filmation said already. So if you just tuned in, if you missed that first weekday and you just tuned in, then it definitely feels, even further disjointed, without seeing this first episode here. And real quick, not to go too far into the history because I don't know all the history, but this concept that became New Adventures, became the straight He-Man toy line. It went through a number of iterations before it got here, and it actually started development with Filmation. This Filmation was trying to create this new series in the future, and back then it was going to be called He-Man and the Masters of Space. So even Filmation was going to take it into outer space, and we could do a whole episode about all the concepts there. I know there was the one where the ship, they were on the ship in space and it was alive and it could create a double for Adam, and I know there's another concept along the way where it was going to be Adam and Skeletor's kids fighting in the future, and there was actually going to be like it was going to be one of those like live action / animation thing, kind of like Captain N and all that, where He-Man.
Yeah, I remember those.
He-Man and Skeletor were actually going to be like live action, and they just like appear on like view screens and stuff, like talking to their kids in the future, but then like all their adventures would be animated and stuff. So
it was He-Man and How I Met Your Mother, basically. Yeah. It's the bookends of the episodes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So.
Oh boy.
So there was a number of things that could have happened here. But eventually, Filmation, unfortunately, they got sold and shut down about a year before this came to be, and so then Jetlag ended up coming in and picking up a lot of the concepts and kind of pushing it to this, between them and Mattel working together, obviously, pushed it into what is New Adventures of He-Man. Like I say, it ran one season, first run syndication, so you got a whole 65 episodes. And that was between September of 1990 and December of 1990. It ran through its first season there.
That was it. Jeez.
Well, September, October, November. 4 months, 65 episodes, 5 days a week. That's. I know I thought the same thing right when I read it. And obviously it stayed on the air, longer than that. But that was its original airing. Original first run. It ran through the 65 episodes in those 4 months. I don't think it stayed on too much longer. Probably by the end of 91, it was probably off completely, But yeah, so. But it, like I said, it's not. It's still got, almost twice as many episodes as MYP. That first run syndication. It, you really have to churn out the episodes. So, and it's got some good ones.
And that hurts.
It's got some good ones. It's got some bad ones. And I will praise it because it's the first show to really do the continuity. That especially these first few episodes go together. There's a few 5-part episode sagas along the way. Which is more where I wanted to take you when I said, I told you I was juggling between a few episodes in my head, but I felt like we really needed to do this first episode first. But there are some real gems down the line. This definitely is not one of the best episodes. It's very much just the setup.
Yeah, I needed that, though. I don't think there's many characters that I could name on this series. Like I know more of the good guys than the bad guys. I know Flipshot. I know Hydron. I know obviously He-Man, Mara, because she crosses over into the new Netflix She-Ra. So there's that.
Wow.
Yeah. Trust me, I at least have that idea, and then like Optic, obviously I know Tuscador, Skeletor, and that's kind of like I got nothing else past that, and even then it's like, well, who are these guys to me? I don't know, and so it's like this is very much I'm the blind guy, and just you're leading me through this, trying to help me figure this out tonight, basically.
And I will say,
so yeah.
if you ever, if you ever do end up, which I doubt you will, but if you ever do end up watching the whole series from begin to end, they actually did try to really flesh out some backstories on some of these characters. You actually get quite a bit on the Galactic Guardians, some of their backstory and stuff. A lot of growth, lots of continuity, honestly. I mean, that's the one thing I got applauded for. Even if I don't agree with everything they did, they really... You can tell Jack Olesker and all these guys working on it, they really were pushing for something. Here again, even if it's not the most respected, era of the property, all these guys working on it were really trying to put out something good. They were not just phoning it in, So, you at least got that.
Well, I like it for the fact that, like, I respect it already just for the fact that if they are trying to do continuity, that is one of the things that to me is interesting about it, at least, because like that's another thing. Like Filmation, I know why they had to do it the way they did it, but I would have loved to have it that way, even if it didn't make sense back in those days, because that's part of, I think, what I've been trying to think of something in the last couple days since we talked about this, and it's mostly like what was the point of everybody from the 80s that grew up with Filmation figuring that was something that maybe they outgrew at some point? And to me, I think it was when some of these cartoons came along that did say, okay, we're going to tell a story all week long.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't just a once and done. So like we had properties like Voltron. Voltron, the whole thing was one after the other. You were keeping track of the storyline in the beginning of all the pilots getting to the lions and uncovering the mystery and all that. We had G.I. Joe doing their week-long thing with the Rise of Serpentor. And even they built a kind of continuity and mythology along the way.
Oh, yeah.
And Thundercats. If you missed the first episode of Thundercats, you were like, okay, what's the deal here? But people still got into it, at least. And there was a little more, like, I'm not trying to belittle Filmation, but there was a certain amount of, it was once and done stuff that usually... it wasn't building towards something climactic by the end of the week, whereas some of these other ones were doing there. So it's kind of cool that at least that version of He-Man, the New Adventures one, saw this is something that is being done in that era. Let's give it a shot on here, at least. So for that, you got my respect. And I mean, we're doing this show, so the chances of me watching more episodes are definitely better than me just on my own here, just hanging out watching hanging out with my classics down in the basement.
I've got a list for him, so. But yeah, and honestly, I'd probably put it closest to Thundercats there, because Thundercats did have a lot of standalone episodes, but they still felt somewhere in like the overarching story, or here again, like you had those 5-parters or 2-parters with a Sword of Omen breaks, or the new Thundercats are introduced, the Lunatics are released. Like that's how New Adventures worked. Like a lot of these episodes you can kind of just jump in, it's a one and done, great, but then every once in a while it's like, okay, here's your week-long adventure, and the payoff on some of these was really good. And you probably heard it, and I won't spoil anything else other than to say that even though it only lasted one season and they did make plans to go beyond it, they did actually put a definitive end to season 1. Like they wrap up all the storylines from season 1, and it's a nice little bow on it, and it's done. Unlike Filmation, where it just stopped, or even NYP, really, I don't count that as, a place. I mean, it was a season ending, but it wasn't like a series ending. Whereas New Adventures, they actually made the episode where, okay, this is it, and then they could go other places after that, but it still felt like, okay, you've got a complete series here. Whereas I know we're still mourning the loss of MYP. He was taken too soon.
Yeah, that's always gonna be that's always gonna be me inside, like dying a little, knowing the last scene that we get was Zodak flying off in his chair with a smile on his face, and that's pretty much where we ended up things. Right. And it's like, that makes no sense.
Right. It's a good ending for Zodak, but it's not.
It's a great ending for Zodak
series. So.
Thanks, Zodak.
It's all about
flying
Zodak.
Around in your the Cosmic Enforcer dental chair.
Yeah.
So yeah. Which now I'm actually thinking that I know we want to talk about something else too. Do you want to do the episode and then we can talk about the
deep in the New Adventure?
Let's do that. All right. And then we'll get back to the other part then. Cool. All right.
No, yeah, that's the way it looked like it was going, so I was rolling with it.
I accidentally pushed us in that direction just by going on my rant.
You are ready to talk about this. You need to get this off.
But I've needed this. I've needed to talk about it because I've been here for 2 days going, Matt, what did you do to me?
Hi, I'm Shawn, and I'm an NA addict. I can't tell any of my friends or they'll think poorly of me.
I am Shawn. I like to be on Eternia, but he somehow sent me to Primus. This is me being confused.
So yeah, I mean,
my fearless state. Boy.
Obviously our episode this week is The New Adventures of He-Man: A New Beginning. This was written by Jack Olesker, who is also he wrote a lot of episodes, and he was like the series director for New Adventures. I don't think he wrote the series Bible. I'm pretty sure that was someone else, but he kind of took the series Bible and, like all the concept, and he actually, plotted out the storyline, and very much like the Dean Stefan for New Adventures. And Mr. Olesker has actually been really forthcoming and involved with the fan community over the years. He's on the org forums, he's answered questions, he fills us in on backstory and everything. So, anybody who wants to know more, go check out, and I'll probably drop a link down below. There's a whole thread there just that Jack started on He-Man.org, where he's just like, pretty much an Ask Me Anything before Ask Me Anything was a thing,
That's cool.
So, it's a really interesting read, and that's part of what's given me the appreciation, like reading what he still has to say about it to this day, is like, okay, he put a lot of heart and soul into this, regardless of, decisions that were made beyond him. There is a lot of heart and soul in here. So, but the neat thing about this episode is it doesn't even open up with He-Man and Skeletor. It opens up in the future on Primus. The mutants are getting ready to attack Primus yet again. Primus has a shield. They're touted as that planet has the last of mankind on it, and they got the shield protecting them. And there's these evil mutants that are constantly trying to break through the shield so that they can take over Primus. I mean, it's pretty standard science fiction setup, but I always did love the look of the mutants, Flog and Slushhead and everybody else, and their ships, and right off the bat you get to see the difference in animation. And again, here we're going overseas for animation, which everybody else was doing, so praise Filmation. They were the last ones to be completely US animated, but that relied heavily on the stock system as the only way they were able to afford that. And right off the bat here, you can see we're not relying on the stock system anymore, as you've got plenty of unique, mutant troopers and ships. And I mean, in this first opening sequence, you see more ships on the screen than almost any Filmation episode, Rainbow Warrior is going to be the closest you got to this. So what'd you think of the overall design of the villains and everything, Shawn?
Okay, like, I knew the animation was not going to be Filmation, and to be honest, huge credit to Filmation. When I saw the stark difference from Filmation to this, and the funny thing is, my son actually yesterday, he had to sit down with me. He had to watch an episode of Filmation. He's been very much in a He-Man kick.
Nice.
So we ended up watching Battle Cat.
Okay.
Because he loves Battle Cat. We're sitting there watching that episode, and it's like I'm just grinning from ear to ear watching it with him, and the fact he gets into it just as much as I did when I was a kid. And, it's like I just had a taste of that, and then I watched this. And it's like the best way I can describe it is it feels like whoever animated the real Ghostbusters decided, hey, what can we do with He-Man? And it's such a, like, I can sympathize with any fan who looks at New Adventures and says, this is not my He-Man, because a huge part of what made He-Man was that animation, that style, and the Filmation. It was its own feeling, because when you get into like the mid '80s with all of the overseas animation coming in with like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Mask, Thundercats, Silverhawks, there's this definite, like, you can sense it's not stock anymore the way Filmation did it, but there is this hurriedness to the animation. And in the case of Filmation, there was like, I'll say it. I'll just say it. There's like this dedication feel to it.
Yes.
There's this. They're not. They put what they could into it, and even if they did stock, the stuff that you're seeing actually felt like. There are people here actually, like the old Disney studios, they're putting in that effort. They're putting in that heart to make the line work look really, really crisp and sharp. And in this, it just feels like everything else you could watch in the 80s.
Yes.
And so on that level, I'm going to be honest, it didn't feel like anything special to watch the animation here. It felt like an episode of Mask mashed up with Ghostbusters with a little bit of Thundercats in a way, and that made it just kind of go. It's not compelling visually to me to watch this versus I tried to do the story at least.
Yep,
that's
where I thought you'd go, and I was hoping you would go, because that's exactly how I feel. While it is nice animation and it's not stock, which is nice in its own regard. Yes, it just felt like it could have been any 80s property to me too. Honestly, I do like the mutant ships and everything. I think they're a real neat design, but I also feel like you could put them in Cobra Law and they would look just as at home as they do here. Like that mothership especially has always reminded me of something that, like, was it Nemesis Enforcer would be like piloting or something,
See, I actually was thinking of it almost felt like these were branched off from Silverhawks with Monstars Mob and all that stuff. It honestly felt like these guys were, if Monstars Mob and the mutants from Thundercats decided to have like this weird incestuous babies, this would be these mutant guys would be, this is their offspring. And I'm just there like, here's something I said I wanted to talk about real quick, and this isn't a bad place to actually bring it up in my opinion. So okay, we had in the beginnings of the 80s, we had the Filmation Masters of the Universe cartoon, and it is for the most part very well loved by the fan community. There are people like me who are still into what they're into, but I appreciate it. I still love aspects and episodes. And it's always been that thing where I'm like, okay, Mattel shut down He-Man by 87 or so when the movie didn't go as well as it did and all that kind of stuff. 87, 88, and then they bring this out right after that. There's always been that thing that I've had in my head of, what could they have done to make He-Man go through the 90s without having to do New Adventures? And now that I see this, I'm like, I know why it wouldn't have worked now, because it's like New Adventures to me is you're taking aspects of every show that He-Man wasn't in the 80s.
Right.
And here it is, and I'm like, this is why Filmation is Filmation, everybody, and this is why this never picked up, because it really does feel like it's a regurgitation of everything, but it missed it by 2 years. And it's the weirdest feeling to actually say that, because you're taking the barbarian aspect out of it. You're taking you're going sci-fi. Well, a lot of stuff went sci-fi in the 80s because that's just we'll go sci-fi, you know, like
no, that's it. They were completely chasing the trend there. Everything was trending sci-fi, but everything was trending sci-fi in about 87, 88, which is when they started developing this. I mean, there was no break for Mattel. That's the other thing that people got to remember. For Mattel, there was no break in here. Like how we, the fans, perceive it, because it wasn't until 90 when this came out. I think the first figures were released, tail end of 89, maybe it was even all the way into 90. But for Mattel, for Mattel working behind the scenes, there was no break here. They went right from, they had He-Man, they had She-Ra, they toyed around with Powers of Grayskull for a minute, and then abandoned that and moved on to Masters of Space, and that evolved into New Adventures. And so for them, it was like, okay, seamless. But for the public, it was like, no, there's been a break here. And by the time this came out, everything, by that point, 90, then you're going the Age of the Turtles, X-Men was getting developed, Spider-Man, they were going superheroes. So yes, they were behind the curve there. Absolutely.
It's the weirdest feeling, because in the 80s they were ahead of it. Yes. They were trailblazing in the 80s, the stuff that became everything we knew in pop culture, And it's the weirdest thing. It's like, this is where the stumbling hits, and it's like, you could see it, the animation and all this other stuff, and even the story. It's like, I can. It's the weirdest thing. I'm watching this, and that was the 40-year-old me watching it, and going, "This is that moment." Like I have always wondered if, because Filmation using the stock animation and all that stuff, I've always had in my head, like, well, what could they have done if they did it a little more like Thundercats didn't have as much stock animation that I can remember.
No.
So what if they had it where it was a little more? Yeah.
It was that overseas animation,
and everything.
So it wasn't relying on the stock system, which is what made Filmation feel so. Once again, I'm going to reiterate it here. I know I'm breaking up your soapbox, but I'm getting on my soapbox for a second. Filmation is wonderful, beautiful, amazing animation with heart and soul in it. But the problem is that you see that same sequence over and over and over again. That's the problem with the stock system. It's not the animation. Because the animation in Filmation beats this animation hands down, but there are people who will argue the opposite just because you're not seeing the same sequences over and over again. So and I get both sides. I get both sides of the coin, and that's why I brought it up, which led to all this. I get that some people appreciate not having the stock system, but to me it went the other way, to where now it's a G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Silverhawks ripoff. So. I guess in my head I've always been like, well, how cool would it be? How cool would it be to see He-Man in the way that the Thundercats intro was? Because even Thundercats, that animation wasn't all that hot when you got into the actual episode. But it's like, you watched at least 30 seconds of it a day to go, holy crap, that intro is amazing, And it's like, I always wondered that. And like I said, it's like, I can see now why that would not have worked to bridge the gap to what we have here tonight. So, but it was a rude awakening this week to realize that. And it's like there's more about Masters that I thought it was going to be my happy place, and I'm realizing I'm getting sadder sometimes by knowing certain things that I don't want to know. It's like MYP, that was the first one to make me sad, and then it's like,
oh yeah, and then there's this that makes me sad, and now this. It's like, oh, all right. But everything's got to have an ups and down. It's just the way it works.
But I stick with me through new adventures. There's better
Yeah,
ahead.
we're doing this. We're doing new adventures, and but yeah, let's see the actual the opening of it. Yeah, like I wasn't wowed by it. But like you said, some of the ships I think actually were really cool. I thought that it definitely brought a personality to the show pretty quickly to see the designs they were using for pretty much everything. Yeah. Even if the animation wasn't really grabbing me 100%, though.
And that's the other thing that's interesting, and you'll see it as we go through. I hope everyone who's listening along at home, takes a second to actually sit down and watch the episode. But here again, okay, so now we're into the other side of the coin. We're into the overseas animation. There's no stock, or at least not like Filmation used stock. But you'll see throughout this episode that there's a lot of times where the characters are off model or proportions are wonky, and there's the flip side to the coin there, because and you'll hear the stories. You can look it up with a lot of these creators of different series. They said when you're using some of these overseas animation studios, sometimes the stuff you get back is just complete garbage. And then they got I remember one that sticks out of my mind, and this is a complete tangent, but an interview with Bruce Timm back in the day for the first season of Justice League, or maybe it was the second. I don't know, maybe you've heard the same interview. It was on the DVDs.
I might have. Go for it.
It was, well, it had been second season because it was Darkseid, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't until the set. But anyways, he was talking about the episode where Superman meets back up with Darkseid, in Justice League. And I think Brainiac's involved too, and there's a big fight with him, and he said, like, the animation they got back was like complete garbage, and they had to go sit there with their own animators in-house and try and like cobble together, and the editors, and like try and cobble together this animation to make it look halfway decent, because they were out of time and they didn't have enough time to to send it back overseas and be like, redo this. So they had to, and he's like breaking down the scene. He's like, yeah, these cuts, we had to take them all out of order, and we like half of this we like took off screen so you couldn't see that part of the animation. And it's like, okay, so that's the flip side to the coin. There is that sometimes you just get these guys who are just phoning it in. And I know there's a few shots of even He-Man during this episode, where it's like, he just looks odd. He looks too short or too whatever. So that's why I bring that up. And I'm not trying to put New Adventures down necessarily. I'm just trying to show the two sides of the coin. So now you've got this more sameness with the animation, and you've got I noticed a lot more off-model moments. And Filmation had them too, but that's the end of my rant, I promise. Now to the story. So yeah, so we set up the basic premise here. The mutants, they want to invade Primus, take it over. People of Primus obviously don't want this. And we're introduced to a lot of people in rapid succession here, actually. You're introduced to Drizzy and Kaz, who are, taking care of the flocks of animals. You're introduced to Master Cebrian, Mara, Hydron, Flipshot, the scientists, which, oh boy, those scientists.
I've heard horrible things about them, and then I was like, I think these are the scientists people are talking about. And they didn't bother me as much, but I'm imagining as the thing goes on, it's going to make me probably want to put my fists through a wall or something. Because I could see them getting annoying pretty quickly.
They get a lot more screen time. Two of them even have a whole episode basically revolving around them later in the series. The scientists are everything that people think Orko and Snarf are. But they actually are. Like, they are just... They are supposed to be the comic relief. but they are not funny. They are, they're just annoying.
The one, I thought the one looked like Guile from Street Fighter, and Gwildor had a love child, and that was enough for me to just go, I don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah, the little troll-looking one. Yeah.
Yeah. He looked like the weightlifter troll, but he was like Gwildor body type, but he had the weightlifter troll thing going on. I'm like, I don't know their names. I just know.
I think that was.
Apparently, people don't like them, and that's all that there is to it.
Pretty sure the troll-looking one is Geppel. The tall one with the red cape is Alcon. And the other two I can never remember because those are the two that kind of come to the forefront. The guy with the glasses and the bald guy, they kind of fade into the. They're still there, but it really focuses on Alcon and Geppel from here on out. So. But yeah, here they're not too bad. We just find out that they've created a time machine basically to go back to the past and find the power of the good in the way of the magic and bring it into the future to help them. And that is now Shawn's new favorite phrase. He has finally figured out what he wants his first tattoo to be. It's going to be power of the good, way of the magic on a scroll right on his lower back. He's decided. He told me earlier.
I'm pretty sure that New Adventure should be a drinking game, and like anytime, because the first episode will get ya drunk already for the fact that they say that so many damn times. And it's like it's in the freaking beginning of the show, even like every time it's on there. So and I kept hearing this line, and I'm like, okay, and then when I realized, oh crap, I'm gonna hear this a lot.
Yes,
it's like okay.
it is a recurring theme. It is, like you said, it's in the intro, it's in the opener. This is what they need. They need that's what they're missing. They're missing the power of the good and the way of the magic. So, but other than that, it's a nice. It's a nice peaceful world. As we find out, Master Severian goes to talk to the Inner Council, which is basically a council of elder type deal, but there's like about 20 or so of them. I mean, there's a lot of these guys, but basically they live in these crystals, and it's their power, their energy, their life force that is supplying the power to the shield that protects their whole planet. And they even say that it's been thousands of years that this council has protected the planet. So most of its inhabitants are very peaceful. They do have the Galactic Guardians, but they're more doing simulator stuff and training rather than actually combat. But we find out that the power of the council is dwindling, and they cannot hold the shield together much longer, because the mutants are just attacking constantly, day after day now. So Severian's big plan is to go back into the past and find a hero to help them. You looked like you had something to say.
No, I was gonna say that was the crystal part was another one of those nods. First thing I thought when they opened on that scene was Dark Crystal.
Okay. Yeah.
And I couldn't help it because it looked like the Dark Crystal to me when I saw that part. And when it showed the whole council like you're talking about, I was like, this is one of the elements I think is actually really cool. And I'm wondering if that's something that maybe they nodded at in MYP because of how many crystal-like things are in Grayskull and all that stuff. It's almost like a bridge to that maybe. But that element of it I thought was actually really cool.
Yeah.
And the aspect of these people are giving their life force to protect this planet through this. That was one of those moments I'm like, works.
Yeah.
I really think that's a cool element in this story. And, maybe like they're dying off. I don't know if they are in the show because, first episode and all. But I like almost the idea. You'd see maybe them dwindling off as the show progresses, as these attacks happen or something. And that's like, all right. So we have some heroes. They're just not out there, fisticuffs. They're in these crystals, and that's how they're they're being heroic to protect everybody. So
yeah, and I can't remember if it's ever explicitly said, but it's pretty much implied there because Sebrian says along to the effect of your numbers are dwindling. So that's the way I always took it ever since I watched it. Is like eventually they just give out and they die, and then that's one less battery to the shield basically, and eventually it's not gonna keep up. But yeah, I've always liked that too. And how they're contained and it is underground. It doesn't really say it here, but this whole structure is like in the, not necessarily the center, but it's deep below Primus, so that they're like tucked away, safe underground and powering these shields. So it's a neat concept. I have always liked that. And you've got Mara there. She's going to see a lot of growth over this series. And basically, right now she's Sebrian's assistant. She helps him, and she's very smart. There's a little implied romance there between her and Hydron. They're talking about how their date's gonna have to wait because Master Sebrian needs her again.
Yeah.
And they do a good job here, like setting up these guys to feel like people. And not just like, hey kids, here's the toys that you need to go buy, and that's what I mean. That's what got me about it is they actually tried in here. I mean, you're into the first 5-8 minutes of the episode, and you're not even to He-Man Skeletor. They're just trying to show you how things are in the future here. Try and get this world going here. Like Drizzy and Kaz, they introduce them, and then we don't see them again the rest of the episode. I mean, they play roles down later in the series, but he's just like, right here, they're just getting them out there. Like, okay, here's these kids. Don't worry about them right now. We'll get back to them later. So.
Yeah, I always felt, even before watching this, but just seeing the designs of those characters, I always had it in my head like somebody at either Mattel or whoever, whichever came first, the figures or the cartoon, had to have watched Centurions.
Okay.
Because when I look at those two characters, Flipshot and Hydron, I just think Max Ray and Ace McCloud every freaking time. And it's like no matter what they do, I'm like, but they're the same color schemes. They have a similar feel to them and all that stuff. I don't know why. It's like, and that again, it goes into the cobbling together of all of these things leading up to this debuting that I can feel. Here's all of these different IPs that I've watched on cartoons, and now it's like we have that, and it's like, well, they didn't put a yellow guy on there because that would have been too close to the I forget his name on the show. He's the only one I can't remember, but there would have been that third Centurion who was the land guy, and they had the sea and they had the air and all that, and it's like, and I guess the thing with him for Hydron is there a lot of like ocean fighting or something? Because the name Hydron and the look of him automatically implies like he would be somebody that's fighting underwater a lot, in my opinion. But maybe, am I wrong?
He's from the ocean. His family lives under the ocean. There's like an Atlantis type city, and that's where he's from. So yes. He's very water based, but I mean it works in space too, I guess. I don't know.
These are the questions.
You can't think about it too hard.
Well, for me, I'm like, okay, because even with Multiverse, he was in space and all that.
Oh yeah,
he's okay.
He's the leader. In this, he's the leader of the Galactic Guardians, so he does venture into space and everything. But yes, originally he's from below the waves. I can't remember the name of the city, but yeah, it's a whole Atlantis type sunken city that him and his family are from. So that's why.
Okay, I'll go with it. You
gotta roll with it. But
I got no choice this episode. I'm rolling with it.
So. But yeah, so then, there's this big storm coming up where Sebrian says, past and future are gonna meet, and you get some bits with the scientists arguing. Just fast forward through that part. It's fine. And then Hydron and Flipshot go back to the past and wind up on Eternia. Basically in the shadow of Snake Mountain. And so they fall out and they get met by this goat type person named Andros, who is serving Skeletor. And no, I don't have any good reason why they used a new lackey for Skeletor instead of pulling out a Beastman or something. Go ahead, Shawn. I know you want to say it.
No, I was just like, I don't get it, but yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Along the way, Skeletor collects henchmen left and right at times. So it's like I kind of figured this is a little bit like this is past where Filmation ended. So it's like, all right. He probably has a couple new guys in his roster at this point. I don't know. Maybe he's given dental. He's got dental this month, and those guys are, we could use some help. I don't know, but
always the dental. But yes, he's got a new. He's got a new warrior named Andros. He's got goat horns and stuff.
And he brings his people to the table too, so it's not just one of them. He had a couple guys with him at least. So
some guys with him, and he grabs them, and he's gonna take them to Snake Mountain.
Yep.
Which here
and well, I was gonna say the Snake Mountain here. I actually thought it wasn't a badly rendered version of it compared to, like it. In this case, all of the other designs are so starkly different for Skeletor and He-Man and everything that I would almost think they would have had like their own take on Snake Mountain. And then when I saw that, I'm like, it actually is almost consistent to what we were used to, at least. That's kind of cool.
The colors are a little blander. And there's no dark... Excuse me. There's no dark hemisphere, it seems, because it's pretty much broad daylight behind Snake Mountain. But yeah, other than that, it looked pretty good. I was gonna say the same thing. It looked pretty on model. And honestly, even Skeletor's Bone Throne was pretty much intact there. It was up on a pedestal this time, but it was
MYP.
Yeah,
it made me go there. So it's the weirdest thing. It's like MYP is taking elements of both in like little ways that I never even thought that they did. I figured the way they did it was we're just making it more epic looking than Filmation could do. But when I saw some of these things, I'm just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You guys. You guys.
That I didn't pick up on until this viewing today. But yeah, watching that with Skeletor's Bone Throne sitting on top of this interesting like pedestal, that it looked very similar to how MYP sat up, kind of a little bit raised on there, and even the kind of designs there. I thought the same thing. I'm like, maybe they looked at this series a little bit more than we thought they did, But
or if not, they had. It's like you and I when we don't talk. We just all of a sudden when we get on Messenger, and then the next thing you know, we're in the same mindset no matter what. So there you go. It could be the same thing, and then they go back and look at it, and they're like, "Huh?
Yeah, look at that.
Look at what we did. Look at that."
Yeah, it could just be that serendipity that they just both happened amongst it, but
sure.
But yeah, then we get treated to the greatest rendition of Skeletor this side of a cereal box.
Yeah.
There's nothing good to say about this initial design of Skeletor. At least with the toy and the Classics toy, it looked pretty good, but he did not make a good transition to animation. And then on top of that, in this first episode, they gave him eyeballs, and just the way the skull is and moves, it doesn't look skull-like. It's too... His jaw moves too fleshy, you know what I mean?
The way that I viewed it, because this is the only way it's that whole last week we talked about in issue 3, the artist was drawing teeth huge. That was one of my biggest pet peeves. Then I look at this, and I'm like, this version of him makes me think Plundar took over. And this is Plundar with no skin or fur on his face, and he's now Skeletor. Because, like, who voice casted this thing? Like, that for me is, like, one of the biggest thing. Like, he can look that way. And it's like, I get that pisses people off. And it's like, to me, that doesn't nearly annoy me as much as the voice, for the fact that the voice has no element whatsoever of even feeling remotely creepy, evil, ghoulish, nothing. It just, he sounds like a used car salesman.
Yes, he does.
And why would they do that? Skeletor was never a used car salesman. Skeletor's supposed to be the overlord of evil, the lord of destruction. And then he sounds just like he can, like, he suavely wants to ingratiate himself with people in this and stuff. And it's like, what? Like, what is going on with this?
Yeah, he was voiced by Campbell Lane in this series, who did a lot of voiceover work, but yeah, it was not the right feel. It was not the right feel. Like you said, he's a con man. He's trying to, like, sweetheart talk everybody, and it's like, no, that doesn't work.
It had that, like, Joker vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like 89 Jack Nicholson Joker a little bit. It had that, like, because he'd have those moments where, like, in the movie, he's walking around the table talking to the corpse of the guy he just, like, flash fried in front of everybody. And it's like, anytime he talked, it made me think of scenes like that from the 89 Batman, or, like, never rub another man's rhubarb and all that stuff. And I'm like, that isn't like, that's Joker in that vein, but this is not Skeletor. That, like, no.
I agree. So. And as far as the animation goes, I think right away they knew they had a problem, because especially the eyes, and that's why I bring it up, because after this episode on, they start messing with his eyes. Like, they go black for an episode, they animate him with, like, when you start watching further in, they start playing around with Skeletor's design pretty much right off the get-go. So even the animators weren't happy with this. You can tell, because the proof is there. They were messing with it constantly. And it's only like the 6th or 7th episode they end up changing his outfit completely, and they put him into the not the Discs of Doom, the one that came before that, but they put him into one of his other toy variant outfits almost immediately at the beginning of the series here. So they obviously were not happy with him any more than we were, because they start messing with him immediately. But yeah, right here he looks goofy. He's got too big of teeth. He moves weird. Yes, now that you've said Joker, I can't unsee it. That's the perfect explanation.
There's definitely someone else too.
Yeah,
I can't think of who else. I think it might be the only other person I can think of that would be sort of like that is Jim Carrey in The Mask. And it's like, if you cobble Joker and Jim Carrey in The Mask, boom, you got this version of Skeletor, neither of which it's like, no. This is never how he should be.
The Mask came out years later, so maybe Jim Carrey based his performance on Campbell Lane's Skeletor.
It's possible. I don't know if it really that would. I don't know. For some people, that might not be a saving grace. Still, I don't know. But there's just I felt like I've heard that tone of voice in some villain, and I'm just like, whoever that was, no, this doesn't work. So yeah, that was definitely one of those things I've heard complaints about, and that's justifiable to me, because at least with He-Man, he's got a heroic sounding voice. He doesn't have the John Irwin, but there's still that He-Man-ness to it. You know, he'd have that, like, he'd have that hero tone in his voice.
Is there a He-Man-ness to it, or is it someone else?
Well, there's a Man-at-Arms to it. I know that. I know that.
Okay.
I do know that that's him, and Gary Chalk. I know that's him, but that's not him when he's Adam, is it?
It is not.
Or is that two different voices?
Is two different voice actors, but He-Man was voiced by Gary Chalk in this one, who also did Man-at-Arms in the MYP series. Adam was voiced by Doug Parker. So.
Okay.
They did two distinct voices this time. But yes, actually now going back and watching this, I can't hear anything but Man-at-Arms. When it was even tonight, I'm sitting there like, okay, that's Man-at-Arms narrating the intro. That's Man-at-Arms, doing this and that. It's because he's a much better Man-at-Arms than he is a He-Man. He's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not.
Definitely.
It's not a bad He-Man. It's much better than the Skeletor, but it's not quite there. Gary Chalk definitely has an older, more authoritative voice than what I normally put with He-Man. But it works. It works. It's not, like I said, it's not the worst that there is. And I completely lost my train of thought there.
Well, we were on Skeletor, and then I screw up by throwing He-Man into the works there. But Campbell Lane as Skeletor, and we have him giving his guards some crap at this point in the story. Yeah, since we're going back to the story part.
There's that little bit of comic relief they tried to do. It just kind of fell flat, and yeah, it's weird. But the long story short is Skeletor manages to convince Hydron and Flipshot that he is the protector of Eternia. He's the good guy. He's willing to come with them to the future and help them in any way that he can. He berates Andros in front of them for accidentally locking them up. He says, we get lots of bad guys around here, and Hydron and Flipshot are like, well, okay, he's obviously powerful, so let's, he must really be good, he's working with us, whatever. So they go to take him back to the future with them.
I did like Hydron actually saying, I didn't realize the good was going to look like this, though. Because that was one of those things, and when I was a kid, my mom hated about this line. She's like, why is the bad guy having to look that way? Why can't he look handsome? Because it doesn't always mean that because you look that way, you're the bad guy. And in this case, I love that they actually brought it out in that little line, like, well, I don't think they'd look like this, but we'll give it a shot. Why not?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like it's still trying to teach the lessons or whatever. And in this, it's actually the opposite. But it's the eye of the beholder thing. It's well, I mean, just because he's got a skull face, that doesn't mean. I mean, what's that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so they head off, and then we meet up with He-Man here, and Sorceress speaks to him through telepathy, and basically just fills him in. Hey, there's guys from the future. They need you to go with them. They need your help. And you better hurry. Because they might run into some Skeletor or whoever. And so He-Man goes to make preparations to leave Eternia forever. And so that involves him going to the Royal Palace. We see King Randor and Queen Marlena, albeit they are a bit off in the color scheme, but other than that, the throne room looks like the throne room. They look like their Filmation counterparts. And we see Adam there, and he's telling them he's got to go to the future. He's got to help them. They're really proud of him, and then he gets the call from the Sorceress again that hey, they've already found Skeletor. Skeletor's about to disappear to the future. You're going to be too late. And so then we got the big reveal moment where he actually transforms in front of his parents, and they get a chance to realize what he's been doing all along and tell him how proud they are of him before he has to leave for the future. It's a nice little moment. It's cut a bit short for my liking, and I've never... I don't know. That's not the way I want the secret to come out, but at least they took the time to do it.
I'd say, like, for me at least, I like... it is cool to at least have that moment, even though Rainbow Warrior, it still trumped it for me in how they addressed that. And I think, even MYP, I think they had a little bit of a wink and a nod here and there.
Yeah. With
even how Marlena was with Adam on a couple episodes, where you get that vibe, like she knows what's going to happen when they leave, and for me, like going to MYP, I'm never going to talk shit about that transformation ever. After I saw this, I'm not gonna lie. They had the weakest take of by the power of Grayskull, and then when he does, I have the power. It was so like I'm not a huge I have the power, but at least that has this. It works to me, and this one it's just like, wow, like it couldn't have been farther from what works for me in any moment of that.
He holds that E for a very long time. And that's basically all it is. It's I have the power.
Yeah. But he has this tone in his voice. It's like it reminds me of like any kid on a playground doing it without knowing how it was done. Like that's like they heard other people do it. It's almost like the telephone game. It's like people watch the Filmation, but then they don't. These kids didn't watch Filmation, but they know that's the line they're supposed to yell, and they yell it. You're just sitting there going, "No, you don't. You're not one of me.
Right.
No. You don't get this. You weren't there. You weren't there like I was there."
But yes, and you have a very plain background. It's like a black background, and then like a fire effect or whatever, and then that's it.
Yeah.
It's like. There's no crossing the sword. There's nothing. It almost feels like the mini comic. Whenever they would do the transformation in the mini comic, how it just like a screen wipe. Like he just like, okay, here I am, and then screen wipe. It's like, okay, here's He-Man. Like yeah. There's not a lot of effort put into it. I got nothing to defend that other than the fact that at least. Here, he does say by the power of Grayskull when he's still on Eternia. Whereas in the following episode, from the next episode out, he will say by the power of Eternia. And no, in the cartoon, there is no explanation for why he changes what he's saying.
Ouch.
At least the mini comic gave the explanation. They came up with a reason for him to change. The TV show doesn't do that. Just in the second, once he's on Primus, he starts saying by the power of Eternia, and that's it.
See, for anyone listening who we have just a couple of lost episodes before we
lost.
Yeah, before we went live with this, and the first one we ever attempted, again, it was Matt leading the charge here, going, let's do the New Adventures mini comic because one day we're going to get to the New Adventures show. And we're going to see the stark difference between how Mattel wanted to do the story versus how the cartoon did. And I'm going to flat out tell you, dude, everything about that mini comic for me was on point with me going, hey, this actually isn't bad. Yeah. They had the electronic power sword for the New Adventures, which to me was odd. But I forgave that just because I felt everything else worked.
Right.
And the whole transformation sequence, in that one where Adam transforms with Skeletor grabbing the power sword and seeing that all along this kid has been the guy he's fought the whole time. It's like you're putting some major cool plot points into this thing,
right.
And then you're having Skeletor getting wounded, and that leads to the whole thing with the technology in him later. It's like, yeah, like
right.
all of that was great. And then we get to this, and it's like
to explain why this stuff was different.
Why? Yeah, and it felt natural. It felt like they really did. It was like, here's the next rendition.
Right.
It didn't feel just so starkly, boom, this is now its own thing, but somehow it's taking elements of what you knew,
Right.
And so, yeah, you win on that every day of the week for me at this point. Like, that mini comic really did knock it out of the park compared to this first episode for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's and honestly, I wish we'd seen a traditional He-Man. I wish we'd seen a traditional Adam. I wish we'd seen a traditional Skeletor here in these scenes on Eternia, because that would make the transition better for me in my mind. The fact that we see He-Man on Eternia and he's already in that New Adventures look, it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Whereas if it was after he left the planet and once he transformed on the new planet, okay. Even if you wanted to try and keep the secret identity, which is the big thing. The mini comic, they ditched the secret identity. He became He-Man permanently. This, for the show, they wanted to keep the secret identity. And you know me, I'm always a fan of keeping the secret identity. Because I think it adds more story, more plot, possibilities. But but they still could have done the transition. They could have had them change once they made it to the future, and that would have helped bridge that gap even more. But I do appreciate that they tried here. And it's not enough time. It's not enough time to do it justice. But they did try to give Marlena and Randor some closure. He-Man at that point he meets up with Skeletor and the two Galactic Guardians, and they get into a fight, and Hydron and Flipshot are trying to figure out who's really good and who's lying to them, and they're like, you know what, forget it, we're just going to take both of them, and they shove them both in the ship, and they take off into the future. Yep. And, the Sorceress lets Adam know, don't worry, Eternia will have, an age of prosperity now that Skeletor is gone and everything, so... and they wind up in the future, and He-Man and Skeletor are still going at it. The mutants end up breaking through the shield at this point and land in there. And then at this point, it's pretty much just a mop up. He-Man fights off all of the mutants pretty much single-handedly. Skeletor's exposed for being the evil villain that he is, and he ends up taking off with the mutants as they turn tail from He-Man.
Yep.
And then Master Cebrian, welcomes He-Man. Adam lets him in on the secret. He changes back into Adam, and he lets him, just to give him that man at arms, that Orko in the future, somebody who can help cover for him. Even the Sorceress a little bit. Master Cebrian's kind of like a man at arms Sorceress rolled up into one. He's the leader of this planet, and he says he's going to tell everybody that Adam is his nephew, who's a merchant from Leviton, which is another city on the planet, and that's basically it. The whole episode is basically just just the setup. That you got the conflict on Primus, you've got He-Man and Skeletor leaving the past and coming to the future, and just introducing your key characters. That's the first episode. So.
Yep, that is that. And
so
I like I said, the mini comic, for it even being, I don't even think the mini comic was like the full page count for a mini comic. I could be wrong, but it felt like that was shorter.
I think it was about the same but we never went beyond that, because even that, those New Adventures mini comics are all one story, so we only got a fraction of that story. It was just the part that mini comic was just them coming from the past into the future, and then so it didn't really set up Flog or anybody there. That comes in the later issues of that mini comic run.
Gotcha.
So,
but yeah, that one to me was like that's why I had to bring it up. Like that one really was that was a way of telling this story that 22 minutes of this. It just kind of went from thing to thing to thing to thing. There's that whole thing about like story is it can't just be events because that doesn't carry the interest of people, and that's kind of what happened here in this episode. To me, it was just scene to scene to scene because it just it needed to go scene to scene to scene. It didn't feel like it was pushing anything throughout this episode to really get you pumped for what was going to happen by the ending. And it's like that's part of the letdown of the whole concept for the first episode.
It was Diamond Ray of Disappearance without that awesome story backbone. It was basically it was just it was introducing the characters, it was introducing the conflict. There's not a lot of story yet. There's not a lot of anything to really make you go, well, I should tune into that again tomorrow, unfortunately, which may be a part of why it ultimately only lasted the season that they made, and that was it. I don't know. But yeah, for me, the big things, and I think we pretty much covered it because we tangented a lot from the episode on this, but the big things I wish they'd done is like I said, show He-Man Skeletor traditional and give them a reason to change. That's my biggest thing here is if you're going to make these changes, give reasons to. Because at the same, it's like it's trying to be a bridge from Filmation, but at the same time, it's starting off as its own thing completely. You can't have it both ways. Pick what you're going to do. Either you're going to continue on from Filmation, or you're going to be your own thing from the get-go.
Yeah. You're alienating the fan base that you're wanting to have come along for the ride. But again, the fan base was also getting older by that point. Right. So, there's that element, too, of I think they were trying to start catering to the next group. But when you look at some of these designs, it's not the most compelling look for anybody in this show either. Like I know you like some of the Space Mutant guys' designs you were saying in the beginning, but for me, like when I look at He-Man, he has so little characteristic of anything other than here's Warrior Guy. Like at least with the old school He-Man, he had some character with that look. And this, it's just like the hair's pulled back. He has the ponytail, and it's just kind of like it's random Warrior Guy from like what was it? The Galaxy Rangers showed up, or whatever, that old cartoon, which. And, I don't know. Like, I don't hate it. That's the weirdest part about all this. Oh. I dislike a decent amount of it because I don't feel it services the legacy properly. Right. But I don't hate it to the point where I wouldn't watch it again. It's almost like a car accident for me watching this first episode going, well, what can happen next that's going to be as bad as nuts as what I just watched? And then whatever happens next, I'm going to go, why'd you do this to me? I don't know. This is one of the... We have 2 episodes now. We keep doing the story, so we have 2 episodes. Last week, we were both pretty bummed out about the 3rd issue of the DC miniseries that was introducing Masters in all of its glory, and all of a sudden, Damon and all this other garbage. Yeah. And now we got... Here's He-Man, but he's not He-Man. But he is He-Man, but he's not He-Man. It's like, okay.
Stick with me here, because even you admitted that you didn't hate it.
I didn't hate it, no.
That's the biggest thing for me is I think it gits a lot of it definitely gets a lot of flack, and some of it deservedly, but for the most part, I think it's hated more than it should be.
Mm.
And that's why we will be doing more. Because I think that there is some good stuff coming here. And I'll say this to anybody who wants to get a jump start. If you haven't checked out New Adventures before, check out these the first few episodes, really. They all kind of do a story here, as he's coming to Primus. And if nothing else, just go check out the 5-parters. There's one midway through season 1, and then there's one at the end of season 1 that like kind of wraps everything up. If nothing else, watch those. Probably about a dozen episodes total. It's been a while since I've watched them, so I'm not sure exactly on the counts, but there is some good story in here. There's some bad story too, but there's some good story too, and that's why I want to bring some attention to it, because I don't think it does get the attention it deserves, because there is some good to it. So
the advantage that we have of being where we are right now, and knowing this wasn't the end and the nail in the coffin of the actual line of anything He-Man related, is why I'm looking at this from it's a car crash, but I'm curious to see how it works out.
Right.
When this first aired, if I would have seen this, I would have felt like, for all of my opinions about whatever, like Filmation at least was still keeping the heart of what the concept of it was alive, and it was putting these stories in with the characters' interactions and all that stuff, and makes you care about these guys. And if this was what I walked into at 9 or 10 years old, I would have felt like this is taking all that outside into my backyard and punching it with a baseball bat and then peeing on it and walking away. That's why I could see why people would be mad, because there is that feeling of that none of this feels right, but for some reason they put He-Man on this, and I'm supposed to like it because it says He-Man, but none of this feels anything like what I was sold previously. Right. So it's like a bait and switch almost, because they use that title, but it just doesn't have that feeling. Yep. So in that way, I don't begrudge anybody who hated it that you can hate this, because if you grew up from the 80s and you got this and you tried, okay, I'm not going to even fault you for that, because nobody knew 2000X was coming up in another decade after that,
No, if you have legitimately watched this, and just it's not for you, great. Just like anything else. If Filmation's not for you, if NYP's not for you, if Netflix isn't for you, that's fine. But I know there are a lot of people out there who rag on this constantly, who have never watched an episode in their lives, because it's become the thing to hate it. Same, the 87 movie went through it too, where it's in the same problem, really. It's a lot of people felt that was like, oh, that killed the line. People felt the 87 movie killed the vintage line. People felt New Adventures killed any chance of a reboot for a very long time, and that led to some hard feelings. And then you get people coming back into it who are just like, hey, what was this? And they're like, no, that's terrible. Oh, okay, that's terrible.
Avoid it. And and it's giving something a chance, right? And not just having a certain opinion. And I appreciate that about it. But yeah, like I said, anybody who grew up with it and they tried it at that time period, and we had no idea what was going to happen 20 years later. Dear Lord, I don't blame you for hating it, and I don't blame you if that's how you felt and all that stuff. But for me, I'm 41 watching it last night. Yeah. And for me, I'm like, it's almost like a curiosity of just what, like it had to be similar to how it must have felt if you were reading Batman comics through like the beginning of Batman all the way up until all of a sudden Adam West showed up, and you're like, what? But at the same time, there's like but for some reason, I'm compelled to still somehow want to see what happens with this. that's a really weird way of trying to come to terms with it, because to me it's not on par with that in any way, at least not intentionally.
Right.
Now Skeletor to me is definitely on par with like one of the villains on Batman back in those days, but yeah, it's a show. I mean,
it's a show.
And it's one, like I said, when you want to throw a new one at me, I'm like, all right, let's see what happens on this one, and we'll go from there. But
there's a good chance. So, all that being said, I mean, you can't fault the plot too much because they're setting up a whole new series. Animation is hit or miss. Redesigns are blah. I think I'm gonna have to go a 4. 4 out of 10 on this one. It's below average all around, but it's a necessary beginning.
See, I'm gonna go 5, only because I just feel
higher than I did.
I'll only do. I don't hate it. That's what I said. Yeah. Like, there's definitely some elements. Like, for me, I think the crystal part was one of those moments where I'm just like, I could have spent like a whole scene and a half on that part, just understanding what that is about, and even us talking about it now, I understood a little better of what that was, and that's cool. And like some of that stuff, I feel. Oh yeah. It actually helped with the world building in this series, and I enjoyed that. Oh. The designs of some of the ships, like you said, I think are kind of cool. But yeah, and it's hard for me to give it a lower rating because, like you said, it's starting out. It's like every pilot sucks, and then by season 3, all of a sudden, it's firing on all cylinders. Right. It's like I've seen Parks and Rec season 1, hated it. And then once we got into season 2, all of a sudden it's the greatest thing I've ever watched, and I'm laughing my butt off through the whole entire thing. It's like even The Office season 1, it wasn't my thing, and then after a while, and it's like, like you got to give some of these things a chance and give it a little bit of a curve. But overall,
but then though, on those, the funny thing is, if you go back and watch those first seasons afterwards, then they're enjoyable. It's weird.
Yeah, because you get what they were trying to do, because the characters from the back end, and then when you go forward, and it's also fun to see how the character evolved into the one that you liked, but at the beginning they were finding their feet. That's kind of why I did the 5, because, like, to me, I don't know. There was elements of like there was this like spirit of He-Man to it when he showed up that I'm like, you know what? He's not my He-Man, but it still has this He-Man-esqueness to it that it's like he's in the shadow of Filmation. There's no way around it. But
he's in the shadow of all the other ones, basically.
Yes. But, and
but he is one.
Even he is one of them. Yes, and even the intro, they had that moment in it where he's like running and he does that jump, and it made me think of like Lion-O doing the backflip on the intro to Thundercats, and they uses the Sword of Omens and all that. And it's like, it has that kind of feel where I'm like, I got to see He-Man kind of doing Thundercats for 2 seconds, and this is why Filmation worked, not Thundercats for He-Man, and so it confirmed a lot of my curiosity on that level. But the story, it's like, all right, we got the premise down. He's in the future. Let's see what happens from there.
Absolutely. So real quick here before we wrap up. Speaking of different iterations, speaking of development, all of that. It's actually a pretty nice segue here.
Yep.
So over the past week, Kevin Smith has talked some more about the new Masters of the Universe Revelation, a Netflix original anime series. And he's said some interesting things. He's buckling down on that it is a continuation of the original series. Here again, he's still saying original series, so I mean, it's still a little open for interpretation what exactly he means there. But the biggest, and it has been confirmed now that we are looking at 2021 for a release. which I know is quite disappointing considering how far along they are in the process right now.
Yeah.
But that was long before the virus and everything, so I don't think it's even a delay because of that. It's just where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing he dropped in this interview is he noted that the designs for the characters have only been updated to fit with Powerhouse Animation's anime umbrella. But that they did not redesign the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
so my question, especially to somebody who is an artist, how can you change an art style and not redesign characters? It kind of seems to me like that's exactly what a redesign is changing the style. Now, yes, I'll play devil's advocate right off the bat. Yes, he probably means that they're just similar to the vintage styles. Mm-hmm. But the fact that and now everyone has picked up, they're not redesigning the new show that's gonna, I have this fear that everyone's going to be disappointed now when this comes out and it's not Filmation running across the screen. Because to me, all these news outlets and everything picking up this quote of his that these characters have not been redesigned is going to perpetuate that old thing of, Filmation's back. And there's no way this is going to look like Filmation, And I've seen Powerhouse's stuff. They do great work, but it's nothing that's going to be mistaken for anything vintage. Like, I don't see how they can make it look like that.
I think his use of the word redesign is probably not the greatest word to use for starters, because no matter what, this is going to have its own feel. This is going to have its own look, and it's not like they're just going to go and grab everybody from Filmation and put them in a studio and just have at it. Which there has been over almost a year now. We literally are coming up to a year of us knowing this is in the production phases.
August, so you're about 9 months.
Last August at PowerCon, and there is still guessing of what this is supposed to be a sequel to,
crazy,
or a derivation of, and some people it was, is this going to talk about are we including the mini comic canon and all that stuff, and so there's an element of it at this point where I'm just I'd love for him not to talk about it. I'd love for him to show things finally, because I'm not mad at him or whatever, but I feel okay, I'm going to say probably one of the more divisive things that I've been able to say on any podcast to date, I think.
Sure.
Our fandom is so used to what we have, we don't like new things half the time. And we're afraid of the new things because there are people out there that anybody that doesn't make it look like my He-Man is automatically not what I want. And it's that is part of what isn't good about this at times. That we need to let other creative outlets have their ability to do something with this and do their own creative thing. So there is an element of this whole series that makes me wary of it more than I want to be.
Yeah.
Because I'm okay, how much am I going to hear fans hate this? I hear fans hating the She-Ra show and all this stuff. Because it's not going to be identical to what we already had when we were kids, and that's what everybody clings to. Not everybody, but a large group do.
And that's my worry. Because here now he's coming out and he's saying, hey, this is going to look like what you're used to. This is going to look like your childhood. And it's it's not. I've seen Powerhouse's work. They don't do that kind of animation.
Yeah.
It's not going to look like that. So I'm worried that it's going to be the opposite, that everyone's going to be built up that like, this is it. It's a continuation of the series. It's gonna be Filmation. It's gonna look exactly like I remember, and that's gonna come out, and they're gonna be like, well, this doesn't look anything like Filmation. This is garbage, without giving it a shot. You know.
I think whenever they finally get around to either releasing character designs, which I'm still lost at why they haven't been able to do that yet, because if they're at animatics, you would figure that at least as a design was figured out well enough that they're already moving forward with. Now they're in motion and doing the animatronic part of it and doing storyboards and everything. So it's like, how is that not at least giving us a little more to whet our appetites so we can move forward with either our anticipation or our anxiety for this to be happening, you know? So on that level, like, from what you were asking earlier, from the artist's perspective, there's no way that, you know, Kevin Smith could have the identical look of what we had as kids coming out on the big screen. There's just no way around it. Like, when I draw, no matter what I try to do, I can ape an element of a style, but in the end of the day, my style still comes through with that.
Exactly.
And a lot of these animators, I have now watched Powerhouse because of this show going to be coming out, because I'm really curious to see their variety of styles. Like Castlevania is one style. And then they had this other one where I always forget the name of it. It's I think the name of the show, it's in Spanish, but I think it's called Six Fists. It's like one of their other ones that's up there on Netflix, and it's about these three kids that were trained by a sensei, and the big bad they go up against is a pretty ruthless like gang lord, and like that is more anime looking. That's like one version of anime. The Castlevania is a whole nother version of anime, and then people are having their own issues with using the term anime in general for describing this show.
Absolutely.
Because I think they're automatically in, well, I don't want my He-Man to look anime, and it's like, I feel like Kevin Smith being the showrunner is very much, he's trying to calm so many fears, but I feel like he's actually putting down mines, and now he's in the middle of a minefield, because the fans' expectations on something like this, they're not just going to be little tiny baby steps. Right. The minute you see that poster of Grayskull, you're just putting them up to an Olympian level of, this is what we've been dying to see, and everybody's been saying that we've been dying to see this, but there's an element of, okay, how is this going to look other than that poster?
Right.
You know, and nobody knows other than the people working on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, even if we're going to 2021 for it to re-release, give us something. Give us a landscape. Give us a background. Give us a royal palace. You know, there's got to be something set in stone by now. They've got scripts done, approved. They're shooting dialogue. And you're telling me that they don't have any character designs done that they can share. And that would be the best thing to make, to get people to just, to just shut up. It's, if we could just see it. Because all the stuff he's saying, I'm of the fear, like I've said, it's going to be a backlash. He even goes so far to say that the story will function as essentially the next episode where the 80s animated series stopped. And that's that. Everything else that they've said about the plot is not that. It's supposed to be, from what I've heard, it's only one season. It's a mini series. It's not even an ongoing. There's this whole big plot that runs throughout the whole season. So right there, that's as far from Filmation as you can possibly get. And like we said just earlier in the episode, Filmation didn't go from episode to episode to episode. Cold Zone was the last episode that premiered. That wasn't meant to be the last episode. So, to say this is the, this mini series is the next episode to a show that wasn't episodic in that way is right there. It's making my head hurt. Like, if you're gonna say it's gonna continue from that, then you're gonna continue from that. But this, I don't know. I don't like the way he's going about promoting this. I think it's just gonna set us up for disappointment. Maybe that's just me being a negative Nancy.
Which doesn't happen often on this. The way that I look at it is him talking about that to me is like it's similar to That's Your In, it starts off and it kind of has that feel. It'll make you go like, oh, it has that nostalgia factor to the way that the episode will start probably. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard in interviews, it's like it'll be the start of the next episode, and then the next thing you know is this gigantic epic battle that erupts.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I view it in like, okay, the beginning of it is going to be the nostalgia, and it'll pull at your heartstrings. Your inner child's going to be there going like, this is great. It reminds me of this. And then it turns into our adulthood version of what we've wondered how it would be now that we're in our 30s and 40s, and we know Filmation's there, but we want to see it getting pushed in a direction where it can take some more hits. It can take a little bit more to the story and to the drama and to the stakes that they're putting into the story, because Filmation, usually things were status quo by the end of most episodes.
Well, exactly.
This sounds like they're not gonna go there anymore. Like there was one article I saw recently where he was basically saying this would be like He-Man's version of Game of Thrones, minus probably the sex and like the crazy violence and the nudity, but definitely like putting the stakes up to more Game of Thrones level. And I know like just hearing you, I can tell you're not 100% thrilled with that. For somebody like me, I don't want it connected to Filmation to do that. I think my biggest issue with it is if it was its own thing, if it was MYP, because MYP would have done some of this stuff, in my opinion. They did the Snake Man at Arms, so they changed that whole thing up. They killed off Web Store and stuff like. There was definitely some stuff going on there where by the end of a season you got this feeling like crap. They raised the stakes to the point where here's Adam having a showdown with every evil warrior on Eternia in front of Grayskull and nobody having his back. That's good stuff, right. And it's like, they already did it on there. I don't need it connected to Filmation. And I think that's my biggest issue with this.
And that's where I'm going with this, because okay, so this is going to be the next episode in the Filmation series, but it's going to be an epic mini-series that reveals the history of Grayskull, but it's also going to be Game of Thrones minus the nudity, and none of those concepts go together. They just they don't. I mean, and that's why I thought this would be a fitting thing to discuss alongside our New Adventures thing here, because it's what we just said about New Adventures. Are you a continuation of this thing, or are you your own thing? Because you can't be both.
Mm-hmm.
So, decide. New Adventures should have decided. They didn't, and you see what happened there.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think this will be different. I think it will be its own thing, and I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. I think he's just trying to get the fans pumped for this. But I think he's going about it the wrong way, because he's coming at it from all these different angles, and not all of them can be true, or if they are all true, that worries me more, is if they're trying to make all these different things true, is because I think it's just going to be a mess. It's going to be chasing the trend, just like New Adventures was,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to fault the guy, because I don't look at Kevin Smith as a slouch when it comes to geekdom. He is that guy. But in that way, he also... I look at him as a better lightning rod for the geek stuff, like what CW does. and the Marvel movies and even the DC stuff that's come out. He's had his foot in that fandom since he was probably, like knee high to a grasshopper or whatever. And in the case of Masters, I feel like his knowledge of it probably is strictly Filmation, because that was huge in the 80s when that hit.
Yep.
And he was of that age group where, he'd probably want to just check it out and see what the deal is. And he'd see He-Man all over the place. So I'm sure he'd be like, oh, what's this all about? Or whatever. But, I don't equate him to being in the wheelhouse of liking some of this stuff like he does Batman, Spider-Man, and all that. I feel like this is a fringe thing to him.
And he's been upfront about that he does not, this is not his thing, but he has done his research. So, and I don't fault him for that, and we've talked about this before, and I've been mostly positive. I felt good, but it's getting to the point where basically getting to the point where they need to put up or shut up. Either show us something or stop doing all these interviews, because you're just your quotes are tripping over each other, and you may be getting false hopes in people, or false ideas in people's mind about what it's going to be, and that could be even more damaging to it than anything else. So
sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it'll be we're closing in on a year of how long we've known about this.
Right.
And all we've had is, we got a cast list. We saw, for those of us lucky enough to see that Mattel footage when was that? At Comic-Con?
No, Toy Fair, wasn't it?
It was Toy Fair, that's it. Mm-hmm. At Toy Fair, they had that footage, so we got to at least hear what Mark Hamill was going to do. And we got to hear what Chris Wood was going to sound like maybe as Adam and stuff like that. And there was a little bit of scare glow in it and stuff. And it's like, okay, at least we had that to whet our appetites towards this. But, we don't have visuals to go by. And why would they? It feels so weird that it's going on a year that we've even heard about this. And it's something that's coming out 2 years after they announced they're doing this, when it sounded like, no, it actually was going to come out this year, and now they push it back a little more. And that was one of those sneaky things too, because I could have swore it was like, oh, fall of 2020 you're going to get this thing, and then out of nowhere, just in the last couple months, it's like 2021, and it's like, well, wasn't it supposed to be this year to tie in with maybe the release of Origins? And it's like 2021. I'm like, I felt like you said something 2021. It's like that's all we keep getting out of this now. And
we've heard nothing about the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I mean, nothing. They released those 2 teaser images and then radio silence ever since then.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is going on here, guys? I don't know. And it started long before everything else, so.
Well, for me, I think the He-Man one, the CGI one, is one that I'm a little more excited for that one at times, more than Revelation, and a lot of people look at me funny for that. But I'm like, no, I kind of dig that we're getting a new version for a new age in that way. Like, me being beholden to 2000X the way I am and all that stuff, it's like, there's a feeling of looking at that art that they released to make me go, I feel like it's not dead yet. There's definitely, like, he feels like he's in almost like the Snake armor look when you see that silhouette of him with all that stuff, because the armor definitely is not your traditional He-Man armor and all that stuff. The sword is more Eternity War, like you brought up at one point. Skeletor has that vibe like the MYP Skeletor, even, because he's got the hood down, he's got the shadows, the red eyes are coming through and all that. So, I'm more curious to see what they do with that, because I feel like that sounds like they have more free reign to just tell stories. This one, I feel like it's getting to the point where it's getting choked on all the various things it needs to be, and it might not even be all those things that they're hoping for the people that it's aimed at. And this is for us, and that's kind of why I'm like, I'm completely cool that they're using Filmation as the basis to help with the fans that love Filmation. But for me already, that's all automatically like, I don't need to keep drawing it back to Filmation. I kind of want to just do something that is its own thing now, because we as fans keep going to that same water trough, that same well, and it gets to the point where, like, I know my son likes watching that stuff and everything, but my daughter now, she's gotten to the point where she wants the Netflix stuff. She doesn't want to watch the old stuff anymore.
Absolutely.
And because the story is something that's grabbing her versus, like the He-Man, the once and done episodes, those are working for my son really well.
Right.
But, how do you make a new generation love this stuff if you keep drawing it back to the stuff that we had? It won't always work that way. You need to do something different to open it up to someone like me, along with somebody like my kids or other people's kids, or teens, 20-somethings, whatever.
And like we said earlier, I think the He-Man series, the CGI one, it's got the potential to be to have more legs, because Revolution is very much,
I think so.
Even if it's not, right now they're only talking about one season, a mini series basically. Maybe they might come back for a second one, but just the nature of what we know the story's going to be, it sounds pretty much like an end game type of thing. Like this is the ending to that era. Whereas a full on He-Man series sounds more like, okay, these are just his adventures. Like this, we can have some overarching continuity, but basically we're just getting back to the drawing board. We're just going to have some fun. We're going to have some adventures, and it can go, as long as we need it to. And that's what I want. We said about the comic series after Multiverse over. We just want some ongoing adventures. We just want some stuff going on. So.
Well, Netflix. One of the best things they brought out in as long as I've been a member of Netflix was Voltron Legendary Defender.
I still haven't finished that. I need to one of these days.
There are people that love it. There are people that don't like it. But for me, it made me look at what I loved about that. Because I loved Voltron when I was a kid. It was like, when that show came on, I was right on board with that. Just like He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe. Pretty much any cartoon from the 80s. It sat me down in front of the TV, and usually I was just like the most thrilled kid for 30 minutes.
Sure.
But like Voltron, having that come back made me just go like, well, what are they going to do with this? And then after you start watching it, you're like, I care about these characters. Yeah. Holy crap. And then when you see, there is always that typical, and it's the same with He-Man. The minute that they get all the lions to become Voltron, okay, something's about to go down. Just like the minute he draws the power sword, things are real. But I liked how they had to figure it out in that show, and they didn't have all the answers. And the lions were like part of, like, they had to sync up with the lions in order for some of the special features to be unveiled to them and stuff. And then when you get into the bigger stories and the bigger aspects of stuff, like when they went up against Zarkon, I was jumping out of my seat, yelling at my TV, going like, holy crap, he could win, and like my kids and my wife were like, you're watching a cartoon. I'm like, you don't even get that. I'm like, you aren't sitting here watching this. And there's a show on Amazon that I just started with my son, and he adores it. Nico and the Sword of Light. If you get a chance to watch some of that, it's very much like, it'll make you think of the new She-Ra show, but it feels like He-Man. It doesn't have all of that like friends are everything and Care Bear stare the way that the She-Ra one does that pisses everybody off. It does have, like, here's this little kid who is this rough and tumble kid. He's got this sword, and he's going out fighting monsters and rough and tumble beating the crap out of stuff, and then he just wants to eat and take a nap when he's done. And it's adorable, it's funny, and my son is eating it up because he actually, like, Nico will raise a sword just like He-Man, and he yells about, I am Nico, and I'm here to banish the darkness. And it's like, it makes me think of freaking Stanlin.
Right.
Like, I'm not afraid. And he just goes into war. And so, like, those are the shows I look at, and I'm like, why can't we just have a He-Man show like that? I don't need it connected. Just here's Prince Adam. Give him the power sword. Run with it, and just let's have some fun. Yeah, exactly. And I would love to have it have a continuity, because if it's on Netflix, you can binge it, and you're going to enjoy episode to episode some of this. But even Voltron had one-off episodes. Right. They weren't all connected. You could have a couple episodes where it was like, here's them doing this random thing in the middle of the season just to give it a little bit of a break or whatever. But I'm in that mode. I'm like, just give me something that I don't need it connected to something that's going to drive everybody crazy right now. Make it its own thing. Have fun.
That's all we're looking for. We're just going to have some fun.
And then we're going to have tons of episodes.
Yes.
You and I are going to be here going, well, crap, everybody's binging this, but we're one episode in. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun trying to keep up with that. I still hope they go to a 1 per week. I think they should try that out.
Oh, we're gonna have to do like all 5 nights. We're up trying to keep up with all this stuff, and then on the 6th day we fall over, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I think we've run the gamut here. So I think we gave people plenty to think about. So I think I'm just gonna
if they get to the end of it, boy, are they going to be pissed at us. Let's just put it, at least pissed at me, because I'm the guy I am so. Let's not just keep dragging ourselves back to that. Let's do something new. Let's open up the doors. You still
ranked New Adventures higher than I did, so.
But that was the first episode.
You won those fans over today. So.
Okay, you 3 guys, you're with me. Okay. I'm just kidding. It's funny though, because when I listen to Roast Google, they're like, "Yeah, we don't have many people that are like New Adventures aficionados," and then they're like, they talk about 1 or 2 guys on the boards, and they're like, "On the forums, it's this guy. He's like our go-to." And I'm just like, I feel kind of bad. There's an underdog aspect to that makes me just go like, I'm a 2000X guy, and I kind of know how that feels, because we're bigger in popularity as 2000X, but there's still that. I get it. Yeah. You know, like I'll never get the respect Filmation gets. I get it.
Never. It will never happen. But now's the time we ask you, if you've enjoyed this content, leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you're thinking. Like, share, subscribe, all those buttons down there. Check out, there's some links there. Do all that stuff. And honestly, we just want to thank you guys for joining along with us. It's a lot of fun. So, Shawn, you got anything to add?
I'll just say I know we had some new subscribers on the YouTube channel, because I know it went up to over 40 now. That's pretty cool. We got some new people there. Yep. And we had quite a decent amount of people showing up on the Facebook page last weekend. And we are both very happy and in awe that we're drawing attention, and people want to hear what we have to say, which is really cool. And we're glad to have you along. So thanks for following us. Thanks for liking us. Thanks for subscribing.
Absolutely, we couldn't do it without you guys. So if you haven't yet, head over to the Facebook page. Join us up there. Click that subscribe button. Drop a note down below. Let us know what New Adventures episode you want us to do next. What shall we torture Shawn with next?
Or any episode in general of any He-Man, because you know that's the biggest thing. I'm gonna say that before we close. That's the biggest thing is feel free to take part, because that's the one thing that Matt and I are like, how do we make people interact more? And all that we need you guys to do is just throw something at us. That's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be rocket science here, guys. So,
absolutely.
Hey, if you have a question, you have a complaint, you have an episode or a comic or a storybook, let us know. We'll be more than happy to switch our gears to accommodate any kind of a request like that, or a fan comment or whatever. So.
Absolutely. So, if there's nothing else, I'll just leave.